Hi, welcome to Woodcraft's Saturday demo. John, store manager, approached me last week and asked me if I could do some modifications to this cabinet as we're getting ready to put it into the classroom here. I own my own cabinet shop, and our phone rings pretty consistently on this kind of a modification where people are looking for not necessarily new cabinets, but an upgrade to the cabinets they have. A lot of those upgrades will be converting to soft close hinges, soft close slides. We get phone calls, can you turn an existing shelf into a sliding in and out shelf, or can you turn it into a lazy Susan shelf? And then some of it is, can you add shelves to my existing cabinets? I've got areas that aren't pinned for shelves yet, but it would be really nice to have the extra room. So we're going to talk about that today, and that's the modification. The first modification we're going to make to this cabinet is getting it pinned for shelving. This will be part one. Part two of this, this coming week, we're going to construct some doors on 1/2-inch overlay hinges to go onto this cabinet, and Joel and I will be demoing that here to complete this cabinet modification. So let's talk about some of the options on this. When I first started doing these shelf pins back in the day, we would just take and go get a piece of particle board and use it. Cut about a 4-inch wide piece, and that way you had uniform holes. Get a bit that would fit in it with a collar, and we would use it to drill our holes. Well, then the other manufacturers started coming out with different ways to do this. One of the things that they would use is this is called Fast Caps layout tape. I don't know if you can see it through the plastic there, but what it has is it has pre-done holes, or it has holes laid out in a grid pattern for consistency. Craig came out with a shelf pin jig kit. You can see that it comes with a 5mm bit. All the stuff that we're demoing today, you're going to be able to come to your local Woodcraft. Joel and I would love to show you where it's at, and if there's things that we need to cover with you that you don't feel are covered yet in the demo, we'd love to do that. So with the Craig shelf pin jig set, you're getting the 5mm bit, the collet, and you start drilling shelf pins right out of here. Festool, they have their own system too. This is a guide rail that they make a router attachment for doing shelf pins. You can see that the increments here, that's what all these extra holes are for, is for shelf pins. Joel, any questions so far?
No, none so far.
Okay.
Just a hello, guys, from April.
Well, hello, April. For those that don't know it, April's one of our new sales associates here. So when you're in the area, stop in and say hello to April. So, Joel, what I did here is I opened up one of many different options on the shelf pin themselves. This here happens to be a shelf pin nickel. They come in two sizes, Joel. I think that was one of the questions that we had talked about earlier. What's the most common size on these shelf pins? That was one that someone had called into you, I believe, this morning and had asked you to cover it. Joel, the most common size, and that's a great question too, Joel. The most common size on this is either a 1/4 inch or 5mm. So my favorite jig, and we carry these and we have them in the store right now, are these little Wood River jigs. They seem simple, they're plastic, they're easy to use, and right now these come in both metric and standard, so that you can do either 1/4 inch or you can do the 5 mils. So this is the jig that I brought from home out of my cabinet shop. We use these things. I've probably had this one 5 or 6 years, as the holes maybe start to get a little sloppy, I'll have to think about replacing it. It comes with everything you need to do your jig or do your shelf pins. You have the special pin to index it, Joel, and we'll show you how that pin works.
Are you talking about that gizmo?
That is the black gizmo, Joel. This here, if you wanted to zoom on that.
Okay, bring it down a little bit. Okay.
And you'll find this indexing pin to be very important once we get cutting. The nice thing about this, Joel, is you can see that we have holes set up here, all the way through a hole set up. This is an exact mirror of itself. It doesn't matter if I'm holding it like this, it's an exact mirror. So you can work right to left, left to right, top to bottom with this. You'll also see that this has the little rollers. So there's times, Joel, where we may be taking this and running it on an edge to come up with spacing for our shelf pins. In this application today, I've already come in and done some prep work on this cabinet, so you didn't have to be bored with us drilling about 50 holes here. So I've already got some pins going here. This here will allow you to consistently line up your pins and keep everything in the order so we don't have shelves that look like this. Any questions so far, Joel?
I have no questions from Facebook viewers.
Okay. So Joel, then let's get started on the making some sawdust portion of this. So when I came in today and pre-did my holes, I'm going to come and I'm going to drop this to the very bottom of my cabinet. I'm also going to index this edge against the back, this edge against the bottom. I'm going to go to this set of holes right here, Joel, because that holds me out away from that back, and it makes it a lot easier to put those pins in and out. It still gives you the same structural support. With this, Joel, we have this bit right here. This is a bit for the 1/4 inch shelf pin. The green ones will be for the 5 millimeter shelf pin. So we've got our bit set. We're going to come over here, check our memory, and go, yep, that's exactly what we need to do. So now we're going to take this edge, put it against the back of our cabinet, put this against the bottom of our cabinet, and Joel, I'm going to drill a couple holes here. Are you able to see what you need to see, Joel?
Yeah, we will in a second.
We good to go?
Yep.
So Joel, all I'm doing is putting this collar drill bit in the preset hole. And that's how I got started. So now, Joel, what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and again, check our alignment. I'm going to take our gizmo that I just threw on the floor at you, Joel. I'm going to step off camera for a second to pick the gizmo up. And I'm going to feed it into the hole that I just drilled. So Joel, I don't know if you can see that, if you can get a good view for the folks, but that right there is holding that shelf pin jig into place so that now all I have to do is start my run right up those holes. That looks good. Joel does an excellent job for us behind the camera. Doesn't get enough credit on these videos.
many is that?
Well, Joel, if you give me 1 second, I've got 2 left. So we have a total in this cabinet of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 holes, Joel. So the amount of flexibility we have as far as adding pins and shelves to this cabinet is good. No reason to go any lower than this, Joel, or no reason to go really any higher than this. We flipped this cabinet on its top, Joel, because we've already mounted the wheels to it. So it was just easier to do this jig referencing top to bottom. If it was on its wheels and the top was up, Joel, I could take the same jig and reference from the bottom as I'm climbing up the side walls. The jig is preset with this bit, and I don't know if you can see this or not, Joel, but it's only going to drill that deep. And that way you're not punching through the outside of your plywood. So right there, we now have this cabinet shelf pinned and are able to build shelves to put in it to accept the flexibility of the pins we just added. Any questions that you can think of, Joel? Or?
I don't have any questions, but I would like to ask our viewers, what kind of questions they might have on shelf pin jigs.
Yes.
And so we can go ahead and wait for some questions. But until then, Steve, how often do you do this kind of work in your cabinet shop?
Joel, we probably field 2 to 3 phone calls a week right now on just upgrades again to hardware. Can you add a shelf? That most of the cabinets and built-ins that we do this automatic. I tell people, hey, the little bit of extra on labor, you're going to appreciate it if we just go ahead and shelf pin your bookcases right now. That way you have flexibility. It's very seldom that people want something anchored. If you upgrade to a bigger TV and we've built you a TV cabinet, then it's a matter of moving the pins, dropping the shelf versus having to tear apart a cabinet.
Do you find any difficulties with different kinds of wood, densities of wood? Is it a different technique that you use?
No, that's what I think makes this so universal, Joel. It doesn't seem to matter if we're doing them out of MDF or the nicest cabinet grade plywood out there. This system works good. It's user friendly. If you can count, you can use this system.
Do people tend to drill these pinholes before they put a cabinet together, or do they do it after the cabinet's in place?
We, in my shop, like to put them in before they're together, because then we're not fighting stuff like the face frames in that. But the idea, again, is if these cabinets are already sitting in your home, and we're just doing upgrades, that's where where this jig, being as universal as it is, allows me to come in without having to tear your cabinets apart and still get you pinned shelves or bookcases or whatever we're doing.
All right, what else would you like to talk about?
Just that...
how do you plan this out?
That's kind of a common sense layout deal. It wouldn't make any sense. This is the bottom here, Joel. It wouldn't make any sense to go any lower with a shelf here, because this room from here to here, I don't know what you would put in it. So that's about the minimum distance I like to leave on the bottom. And then this on the top, we're still going to get from the very top on the inside, Joel, we still have 15 inches of room there. So we could put cabinets in here anywhere, Joel, in a total range of about 16.5 inches. So plenty of versatility as far as shelves. A cabinet this big, it would be easy to come out and go, Okay, we'd like a shelf at about 11 3/4, which would be right here. So you've got a shelf here, and then we'd like another one at 16. So you've just turned this into a 3-shelf cabinet. But if you've got specific needs on what you're putting in there at home, maybe it's pots, pans, maybe it's your wine or alcohol stash, we can take and figure that out with just some basic math. How high or how low do we want these to go? So there is no set rule on it.
Okay, I could see myself doing this, and it's foolproof. But let's say it's not Joel-proof.
Okay.
How do I correct mistakes when drilling holes? Is there a product out there I can cover up the holes and re-drill?
In this case, Joel, anytime you're covering up a hole, whether we're doweling it or we're using a filler, it's going to show. Paint grade, not as big a deal. So in that case, Joel, what I would probably do is make an adjustment, and maybe I add a couple extra holes to cover my mistake. So let's say that I drilled this hole here, and I drilled that one more. Well, I just add one to that one, add one to both sides there, and I've got it back to where it's symmetrical.
Okay. Can you talk about, this is going to be part 1 of a 2-part series.
Yes,
that
sir.
We're doing. Can you give the viewers kind of a sexified idea of what the next video is going to hold, so they'll tune in?
Yeah, Joel, what they've asked me to do is add a set of basic doors to this cabinet. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in and build a flat panel door with what's called a 1/2-inch overlay hinge. Again, all this hardware and the stuff that we're using is available right here from you and I at our local Woodcraft, Joe. So what we'll do next week is, because the classroom's not completely set up, I'm going to pre-cut stuff in my shop, and we'll take and actually do a glue up on one door, and the other door will be ready to add the hardware. So we'll actually hang a door next week, and we'll glue a door up next week.
That's fantastic.
So that's, and then if John down the road wants us to build the shelves for this, Joel, that's simply a matter of pulling out our tape again, figuring out our depth. So here we could get away with about a 23-inch deep shelf. So that we don't have any plywood edging showing, Joel, we would put a hardwood a face on it so that you're not looking in at that ugly plywood.
Well, I've seen cabinets like this, and they've got little pegs that are in there. Some are pegs, some are kind of have a scoop shape to them. Some are metal and some are plastic.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the difference between all of them?
The ones that I think that I like the most are these little paddles, Joel, and I don't know if you can see that.
Coming in. Okay.
I believe we have them in 3 colors. We have them in this chrome, we have them in brass, and then we have them in a bronze, I believe. These paddles are pretty universal in that once they go into the hole, you can take and spin them, and then your piece of plywood lays right on that flat, or whatever shelving material you're using. Now they have ones, Joel, that will lock. You're right, they make them in plastic, but gosh, our Woodcraft price on these, Joel, you get 25 of these for $4. So that's a pretty good deal. They fit really nicely within these holes.
All right, I've got one more question for me.
Okay.
This is coming from me, the cameraman, the Joel, and that question is, I have cabinets just like this with the holes, but I find over several years those pins are falling out. They don't stay.
Okay.
So what can I do as a homeowner to correct that, to make sure they stick better?
So Joel, would you be able to maybe identify whether it's the 1/4 inch or the 5 mils? And if they're the 1/4 inch, maybe go to the 5 mil pin, which should be a little bit tighter. The other thing that a person could do is they also make rail systems, metal rails, where you can absolutely screw down right over the top of these holes, Joel. And those rails then hold a pin, and you put your shelf on that. Or you go through and you could take the time to take 1/4-inch dowel, plug that, and drill all those too. Again, it'd look okay with paint grade because you can hide it, but when you're on stain grade or they've been cleared, it's going to be obvious.
Well, we don't have any other questions.
Well, come back, join us next week here where Joel and I are going to cover some door stuff. We appreciate your time. Come see us at Woodcraft. If you have more questions, blow up the phone. That's what we're here for. Always good to shout out to our friend April. It was nice of her to sign in today. So this is Joel and Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. See you next week.